Okay, welcome everybody. Today, our title of our presentation is, saying "I love you from the grave," which is a bit of an odd thing to say, but this presentation today really is on the tail of a presentation we did a couple months ago where we had an attorney on giving some real life practical advice on some more on the actual tools that you can use, right? Wills and trusts and power of attorney and healthcare proxies. But we thought this would be a good discussion between the four of us here, based on some real life examples that we've had in the past 6 to 12 months of clients who are actually dealing with helping a family member with their financial affairs if they become disabled or are unable to manage their finances on their own, or a parent who passes away and the executor of the estate realizes, wow, there's a lot of work that goes into this, and maybe I could have asked some questions or done some things in advance. So that's really the main purpose today, is to give some real life examples. So we're going to go through 4 key areas. Angela is going to go through power of attorney, right? Again, our last presentation, we talked about the document in at a high level, but just give some real life examples. I'll walk everybody through kind of the role as an executor or a trustee and some of the responsibilities and some best practices. Colten will then go through the different types of documentation that should be on hand or on file. And then Mario, who, as an introduction, is new to the team. Mario's a CFP. He joined us from the Dallas, Texas area, moved up with his wife and baby, who joined us about a month ago. So we're excited to have Mario, and he's going to walk you through kind of that digital world that everybody lives in and what electronic files are should be available to you. So with that, Ange, why don't you jump into power of attorney and take it from there.
That's good. Power of attorney, always our favorite topic of discussion. So power of attorney, as we had kind of alluded to in our previous presentation, right, isn't a document that's going to give somebody else the ability to handle some of your affairs. Typically, right, these are married couples. You'll see a lot of times, they'll make it be each other, right? And say, oh, it's my wife, it's my husband. Often it's going to be a child as well. There's multiple different ways you can set up a power of attorney. But here, I think it's always important to kind of go over, some of the documents if somebody did name you as power of attorney. So I know I'm power of attorney for a few different people in my family. And so things I need to be aware of, or, anybody else is kind of put in this position to help somebody out in the event that they can't do it themselves, right? Insurance policies, that's always something that can be healthcare. It could be life insurance. So you really want to know where a lot of these documents are stored. Bank accounts and statements are really important, right? Because there's nothing harder than having to go do something for your mom or your dad, and you need to act on their behalf. You're not going to the right bank, right? Or you're like, oh, my mom has an account, I'm not sure what it is, right? So you really want to know where you're going and what you're looking for. Something that popped up that I hadn't given too much thought to until fairly recently was military records, right? A lot of people have served in our military. They have different military benefits. I think that's a good thing to look for as well. Will, of course, that's always going to be important. Shawn's going to speak to that a little bit more. And of course, the healthcare proxy, right? Because your power of attorney doesn't always mean that you're going to be the person in charge of the healthcare proxy. I have seen it where they're 2 different people. I've seen it where a hospital wants you to fill out a different healthcare proxy, in the act of an emergency. So really knowing if there's already a document there that's been updated, it's always important to. Power of attorney has changed. The documents have changed throughout the years. So if you haven't looked at either yours or one for a parent or a loved one, just say, hey, when was the last time we checked this out? I heard some of the lingo might have changed. should we go get this updated? That's always a good thing to do. I will say some financial institutions have a separate power of attorney document. I have seen it where some of the larger institutions say, oh, this is great. You submitted this document to us. We also have ours that we would like you to get signed. If you do, to get ahead of that, sometimes it's really helpful, but you're good. So there are a few different types of power of attorney documents. They're not all created equal. Where we see the most are probably a durable power of attorney, right? This is going to be the one where it kind of kicks in when somebody can't take care of themselves. That can be for a variety of reasons. Maybe they're just really ill at this period of time, or, maybe somebody's got the onset of dementia. So just because somebody's not feeling well now, doesn't mean that they won't come back, right, to a full healthy lifestyle later on down the road. But you can still use that power of attorney, when it's in there, and you can say, mom, dad, brother, sister, somebody is really having a hard time. I need to help them out. Now we're going to use this power of attorney. Again, there's limited. Some say, hey, you can only do a certain amount of things. We've seen those as well. General is probably what we see across the board a little bit more. It's going to give you a more broad ability to do things. And the springing is something that'll come into play later on down the road. They say, hey, we're going to do this now, but this isn't going to go into effect unless I become mentally disabled. I have dementia. I can't, something else has happened to me. I'm in long-term care. Or, hey, 10 years down the road, this is going to kick in. So we will see a variety of different things. That's why it's hugely important to take the time and to read the documents for yourself. And again, for anybody else that you might be power of attorney for.
Yeah, and John, on the power of attorney, I always tell people it's a critically important and powerful document, right? Anybody who's in possession of that durable power of attorney can act on your behalf, right? So you want to make sure, one, you keep that in a very safe place, and that person has access to that document if and when they need it, right? We've seen that before where, mom or dad have it locked in a safe that they only have the combination to, or it's in a safety deposit box or a filing cabinet somewhere, and the children don't know where it is, and they'll come to us and maybe say, hey, look, I need some money out of mom and dad's account to help pay some bills. They're in a nursing home. Well, okay, but we need that power of attorney. So you want to make sure that you have access to that document, and that it is a very powerful instrument. So
yeah, and to your point too, I think what came up over the holiday weekend too was who needs to sign off on something. Are there two people and you need both to agree? So I think that's another really good discussion, and just be aware.
Right. And the fact that document is in effect, that's kind of the progression here, right? The power of attorney is in effect while somebody's alive, right? And typically it is when somebody becomes disabled or incompetent and they can't make decisions or transact financially on their own. That's when that power of attorney is needed, versus certainly the executor, which I'll talk about next, is that comes into effect only when somebody passes away. But that power of attorney effectively ends at somebody's death. And I think that's a good segue into somebody's role as an executor. And many times what we're seeing is mom and dad, grandma and grandpa, they'll create a will. They don't openly communicate that to the family, and they add a son or daughter as executor. And many times people don't even find out they are executor until mom and dad pass away, or maybe mom and dad mention it over dinner one time, but they don't really give any insight to what that means. So from a responsibility standpoint, your job is to be a fiduciary for the beneficiaries of that estate. Your job is to essentially help probate and effectively close down over a period of weeks and months all the final affairs of the person who named you executor. And one thing I always say to people is don't wait until mom and dad are gone to talk about that, right? It's not a great conversation, but it's a critical one. If mom or dad say to you, or an aunt or uncle or a sibling say to you, hey, I'd like you to be the executor, really understand what that means, because on paper in the will, it lays out their objectives, but sometimes what's in writing may or may not get translated to what they actually want to have happen. So review that will with that person that wants you to be executor. Take that role very seriously. Of course, you're probably going to do it for a loved one, but that also doesn't mean you shouldn't be fully equipped with all the things you need to effectively carry out their wishes and their objectives. And I think to that, it's also then reviewing those objectives, I would say at least annually, at least every couple of years, because things change, right? So a lot of times people will create a will and then decades will go by and they don't make any changes to it, right? So making sure you're at least talking with the person who's named you executor or the advisors of that person to say, hey, has anything changed? And making sure you're aware of that. The other key thing there is to really keep these documents in a safe place, right? A lot of times they're in paper form, so you can keep them in a safe at home or a safety deposit box or a filing cabinet. Nowadays, everything is digital, right? So our clients, we have our 24-hour CFO where we have a digital vault, right? And I think that's critical. You want to have access to those documents when you need them, right? You don't want to be scrambling to find them. So making sure you have an organized copy, either I would say both, right, in paper form, but also digitally. And these are all things you can do while mom and dad are, best practices while the person you've been asked to be executive for is alive, right? Understanding their objectives, making sure you're clear on their goals and their wishes, obtaining copies of these documents so you're aware of where they are when you need them. And then what happens when that person passes away, right? I always say, as an executor, and this is also true as a trustee, you want to kind of know what you don't know and then hire competent professionals to help you with all the other things, right? There's the ability, you don't have to go at it alone, right? This is a lot of times people do this once, maybe twice. So be prepared for things that you may not even be aware that need to be done. But again, financial advisors, attorneys, accountants, these are people you can hire that will help you navigate all the moving parts to making sure that as you open the estate to closing it down, right? One thing a mistake I've seen people make is they put not a mistake to put beneficiaries on your bank accounts and your investment accounts, but if mom and dad, let's say you're the executor for your parents, and all the assets are beneficiary to you and your siblings, and there's literally no money left in the estate. Well, if mom owns a house at her death, it might take 6 months to sell that house, right? You got to keep paying taxes, utilities, property maintenance. You want to have money inside of some money, as little as possible, but some money to pay for those ongoing expenses of the estate. Sometimes it takes 6 to 9 months to properly close down an estate. So that's critical, right? And I've seen it where the beneficiaries had to effectively use their own dollars, use their own money to let's say maintain a property until it's sold, and then they have to be that has to be accounted for, and after the assets are sold in the estate, they can be reimbursed. But it's always a good idea or a best practice to keep some dollars in. You can open up what's called an estate account, whether that's at a bank or a brokerage firm, and kind of put any extra cash that's been left in the account. And then the executor has the ability to pay for final expenses, taxes, fees, or expenses of the estate. So that's one that we've seen people do. So from a standpoint of questions to ask, I think that's also just having that dialogue with the person that's been asking you to do or perform this role, right? So what are your goals and objectives? What's important to you? Those are things that will open up different conversations that you'll be able to very clearly understand what they're looking for you to do. a lot of this translates over to your role as a trustee. This is one I see too. You know, mom and dad, they'll create a family trust and they'll put their house or some investment accounts in it. And they'll ask a son or daughter to be trustee. And of course you go, yep, sure, mom, I'll be a trustee. But you don't really understand the fiduciary liability that you have. Because this is one where, as I said, as an executor, your job starts when mom passes away. As a trustee, mom or dad can do this while they're alive, right? So you have a responsibility as a trustee, and you as a trustee actually take ownership of that asset as a trustee inside of the trust. Your job is to manage that asset, whatever that is, house, a bank account, an investment account, for the beneficiary, not for, excuse me, your job is to manage that asset, which could be a house, a bank account, an investment account, not for the benefit of mom who put it in there, but for the benefit of the beneficiaries of the trust that mom designated, right? So definitely a best practice there is to keep really good, clear notes and to review at a minimum annually how those assets are being managed, right? Especially when it comes to bank accounts and investment accounts. Having good in-depth notes that you keep, again, either, just like I said before, either in paper or digitally or both. So if anything ever comes into question, well, hey, why did you manage it this way? Why did you make that investment decision at that time? You don't want to be scrambling after mom and dad are gone, who can no longer speak for themselves of why they put it in there or why they chose you as the trustee or why you picked that investment policy statement. You want to be able to point back to, oh, here's my notes from March or April of 2023. And when I met with the investment advisor, or I met with the attorney, or I met with the accountant to talk about the taxes, this is what we talked about. And it's very hard to, we always say it's never the money until it's the money, right? And we've seen really close families get into some arguments around the decisions that one person who is named the trustee, and if you've got 2, 3, or 4 siblings, maybe it's one of them who starts to call in the question, well, why did you make those decisions? And I think you made the wrong decision. You want to be able to point back to the notes and the discussions you had with not only the grantors, in this case, mom, but also the other professionals around the table, the accountants, the investment advisors, the attorneys, why you made those decisions. So again, that's a fiduciary responsibility that is critical for you to take seriously for the trust beneficiaries. Again, you want to maintain a copy of that trust so you understand the instrument that and the rules, right? Some trusts, after let's say mom sets up the trust and she passes away, there could be very strict timelines to when assets need to be distributed. Sometimes it's immediately, sometimes it's 25% at a beneficiary's age, and then every 3 or 4 years, or at certain milestones like an age or a calendar year, assets need to be distributed out, right? You as a trustee, it's your job, your fiduciary responsibility to make sure that those beneficiaries are being paid out correctly. Some trusts pay out income on a quarterly basis, right? I've seen it where people don't realize that, and years go by and the trust is paying undue taxes and beneficiaries are not getting distributions as they should. That can be, you as a trustee, as a fiduciary, can actually be held liable for not following that trust instrument. So it's critical to, like I said about the executor, know what you don't know, ask really good questions, and hire competent help to help you manage that process. And again, I can't stress enough, keep really good file notes as a trustee as to the decisions you made, why you made it, what your kind of thought process was, and being able to point back to that at a certain time.
Especially as an executor of a will, sorting through an estate and everything that someone who passed had left can be very hectic and time consuming. So one thing as a best practice is finding a way to sort out your documents and having them in a safe spot for when the time comes or helping someone who you might be an executor on a will for set up their documents in a safe way as well. So how to organize these records, kind of break them off into two different examples just for ease and remembrance. You can have your immediate needs, which are things such as bank statements, credit card statements, paid and unpaid bills, anything that you're typically using or looking for on a regular basis, as opposed to normal retirement age or long-term needs, which would be your legal documents, wills, powers of attorney, not bank statements, but mortgage statements and deeds, anything that's going to be longer term and outward. Now, how long to hold on to these records this is very important, because even though someone passes away, the IRS doesn't go away. So the IRS holds the rights to audit a tax return for up to 3 years after being filed, and then up to 6 years for underreported income. So like I said, even though someone may have passed away, the IRS is going to still come knocking if they find an issue. So things to keep for 3 years are those household bills, credit card statements, purchase receipts, anything that can verify money that you spent, anything that happened recently, just because the IRS comes and sees a discretion, you're going to file an audit. And then 7 years, this is where you're going to keep records of income, just in case they do find a discrepancy in income reported. It's going to be those pay stubs, bank statements, checks, registers, canceled checks even, just so you can stay safe. Then lifetime things that you're going to keep are going to be your legal documents, powers of attorney, insurance policies, things of that nature that aren't going to be used in an audit necessarily right away. Where to store these records, as Shawn touched on, safe spots, file cabinets. We have our 24-hour CFO that you can use to keep electronically in safety deposit boxes. Now, your file cabinet might be a better place to keep some of your immediate needs, and especially anything that you're using on a regular basis. Same for electronically, and that's a good dumping ground, like our 24-hour CFO, for those immediate needs and those long-term needs. Just in case you need to pull up on the fly and review, you have them in a safe spot. Safety deposit box is also a good place to store items. This would be better for some valuables, adoption papers, even mortgage statements, deeds. This isn't going to be a place where you want to keep anything that's needed in the event of death, because there's no guarantee, even with a key, that you can get into a safety deposit box if you needed to. So this is not somewhere to keep original copies of your legal documents, such as your will, powers of attorney, or life insurance policies too. So that's just another helpful reminder that you can store anything in a safety deposit box, but if someone's going to need to access that at your death, might not be accessible to them when the time comes.
You should, as a good rule of thumb, if you're not somebody that checks on your safe deposit box often, go every couple of years. Banks do keep track of how frequently people log into their safe deposit boxes.
Yeah, and to that point, Ange, you, I think of a client recently that she had a deposit box and was getting up in age, and you can now add like a secondary person, which is really smart. I think they really become problematic after somebody's deceased. There's a whole petition process, and it's a bigger headache. That one of those things you can do prior to that person passing away, either empty out the safety deposit box. So really, unless it's like a valuable coin collection or a ring or some physical element, something that you want to protect that you don't want to keep at home, in the age of, as Mario's about to go, the electronic files in the digital age, there really isn't a strong reason any longer to keep things like, again, like Colten mentioned, legal documents or deeds to property. All these things can be housed securely at home and then digitally as well as a backup.
Yeah, so jumping into electronic files and digital access to things, first and foremost, security is going to be the #1 topic. As we become increasingly reliant on technology in our everyday lives, it's crucial that we protect not only ourselves, which you'll see a lot of the principles carry over to your own personal life, but also especially in the roles of executor or power of attorney, protecting their sensitive information and their documents. In those roles, you're 100% definitely going to be coming into contact with personal information, as well as sending it out to other professionals like Shawn talked about, attorneys, accountants, financial advisors. So just think about anything that has social security number on it, account numbers, account statements, any of that. We just want to be extra careful when sending and giving information. And there's a subset of criminals that go after deceased people, and it's unfortunate, but that's their target. And so we need to be extremely careful. So building off of storage, kind of what Colten talks about, online storage, and, there's two main options people are going to be using: just cloud storage, which is your Google Drive, Box, that type of thing. Just important to keep your normal two-factor authentication with that and just stay as secure as possible. The other type of storage is going to be on your computer, local storage, hard drive. And with that, that's a good option. Just be aware of anything that you download, in your personal life that maybe have a virus or anything like that. But it's always good to have a backup. So touching on sending out the personal information, some best practices for that, if you're going to send documents or information over email, you want to use those encrypted file links that you'll typically see with cloud storage. It's never a good idea to just send a document over email and an attachment, whether that's account statements, like we said, all that sensitive information. If that's the only way, it's always a good idea to have those password protected as well. Another option, not many people may have access to, but good old-fashioned fax. That's always great. And then, I've personally encountered some financial institutions that need paper copies, whether that's of a death certificate or just various files. It's always good to send via certified mail or some kind of mail that's tracked, and not just, throw a postage stamp on it. And the last point of, sending personal information, you're going to be in contact with a lot of people. Over the phone is a good option, although, with that, trust but verify, right? If you're receiving a lot of calls from people and you're not sure who they are, who they're working for, if they're asking weird questions that you don't understand, it's always a good idea, hang up, call the numbers that you recognize, and just be careful in that sense. Moving on to online account login information. This is, again, something that needs to be in place before the ultimate passing of your loved one. And, it's important to have those conversations. So with this, without the login information to various accounts, you'll be able to do all the things that I'll talk about, pay bills, cancel subscriptions, but it's just going to, increase your headache, and you're already, dealing with grief, and just the whole slurry of responsibility that comes with being an executor. So best practice for this, talk to your loved one, ask them like, hey, what account information do you have? Usernames and passwords. Is there a way that they can, put those all into a letter and store it with their estate document? So have it at the end of their will. And that's only as good as it's updated. So if, we all should change our passwords occasionally, and keeping that form updated. So, reviewing annually or semi-annually is a great option. Then moving on to digital assets, and not talking about crypto, but more so just, sentimental things like pictures, social media, that kind of things. Again, this is a conversation that you should have with your loved one, if you're in this role, and ask them like, hey, what do you want to happen? Some people might say, hey, distribute all of our digital pictures to the rest of the family for them to enjoy. maybe post something on social media or just delete everything off social media. Whatever that is, this is also a good place to, or a good instructions to put in a letter at the end of the will. Yeah, it's not your job to come up with what to do, but it's just have those conversations and, you know, hey, how are we going to access this? What would you want to happen? And the more detailed, obviously, is it's going to be easier for you to carry out your loved one's wishes. And last but not least, privacy, right? So if no one wants people snooping around their business and going through their stuff. And obviously that's understandable. If your loved one doesn't want you to have access to these either account logins or social media accounts while they're living, that's perfectly fine. Like I said, they can always have it in a letter in their will. Or, you know, they may just say, we're not going to do this all together. But in that case, they really should know that there are laws moving towards, you know, granting access to executors of all this private information that would be otherwise, you know, private. But so just keep in mind, but yeah, that's always a concern and should be taken into account. But, you know, that kind of wraps it up. And, you know, the thing we strive for is just digital security in our personal lives. And then again, like I said, with the loved one in this role.
Yeah, thanks, Mario. And I think that brings up two things. You mentioned it, getting an inventory of the things that our loved ones have, that especially as our parents age, but a lot of elderly parents have Facebook accounts and different online presence. So making sure you get an understanding of or an inventory or a checklist of places to go. And there are some practical things you can do. I know, for example, I believe you can do this on Facebook, and I know you can do it on your iPhone. There's actually a process where you can name someone now while they're alive. And that will give, it authorizes, for example, in the iPhone, it authorizes Apple to unlock the phone and release the data, and allows you to control that data post someone's passing. But again, you have to do that now. You can't wait. You want to set that stuff up now. So the digital companies are becoming aware of this. Even a lot of your will, if you've had it updated recently, it should reference digital assets, right? Yeah. Again, we're not talking cryptocurrency here. We're talking about the data or the intellectual property that you have within that digital world that needs to be managed. And it can be very difficult if the person is no longer alive to be able to help you navigate that. So, and we're seeing that, right? I've seen, I think of a client last year that came in, her mother had passed away, and so not only are you dealing with these large financial institutions and tracking down bank accounts and, you know, where investments are held, and back to Colten's point about document storage, right? You really want to be diligent about if an account was closed, either shred every bit of documentation on it, maybe one last statement if you want to, and just write on there in Sharpie marker, closed, you know, April 11th, 2023. If you for some reason feel you need to keep that, but a lot of times there's a filing cabinet full of old documents, and now it's your executor's job to kind of sort through, well, was this account even open anymore? Or no, this account was transferred to this account back in 1997, you know, cleaning up those. There's really, yes, there are reasons to keep certain, like account statements, bank statements, but I always tell clients, shred everything but your last statement, right? You could actually shred everything in today's digital world. For example, we're required to house our Charles Schwab brokerage statements indefinitely, right? So if you ever needed to access them, these financial institutions, for compliance reasons, are required to house this data. So the less you can keep and the more organized you can keep it, the better, not only for your own kind of overall well-being and just organization, but certainly the loved ones you've nominated as your executors and trustees. It makes it that much easier for them to help sort through everything once that person has passed. So thank you, everybody. really good conversation. And like we said, contact us if you have questions. These things are at a very high level. Every situation is different. We help clients work, clients and their families work through these issues every day. And I think one of the ways, if you're not sure how to start a conversation with your parents who just had a will created or asked you to be an executor, tap into us. Give us a call. Let us help you think through that. We're happy to help facilitate that conversation. We do that all the time, and it really does. Like I said, for a lot of people, you do this once, so you can't expect to be an expert at it. We've got the benefit of seeing dozens, if not hundreds, of different situations and how things should and can be handled. So again, reach out to us. Let us know if we can help, and we're happy to have that conversation with you. But thank you very much.